Selestra found herself sitting on top of a fallen column, enjoying the cool breeze that brushed against her cheek. The scenery of the forest, sky, and ruins brought about a striking image. When she was growing up at her family's home, there would be plenty of artwork on display. She remembered running through her family's garden, hiding behind statues from the servants. That kind of upbringing was very insulated, giving her the feeling that everything in the world could someday belong to her. With Celestra's father being a duke, there was no end to those who tried to curry favors with their family. Princes would visit her home and dance with her at various balls. Going to the palace wasn't something unusual for her. Thinking about past memories also brought up recent memories, where she was almost eaten by a monster. Her wet undergarments reminded her about how frightened she was. Before being devoured, a dashing hero, like those inside fairy tales, appeared and slew the beast. Then, with the power of a god, her hero vanquished the creatures and kissed her passionately. Before that moment, Selestra didn't know she had such a great classmate, the way his eyes seemed to draw her into their bottomless depths. His strong arms that held her dearly, not allowing anything to harm her. She felt her face heat up, thinking about how his body felt against hers. It was such a perfect image, her being in danger and then being rescued. This pleasant memory also made her remember how arrogant she sounded, as she accused him of being a coward and leading her to show off. If she weren't so proud, there would not have been as many deaths as there were. At least 4 nobles were killed during the event. Thinking about those who were dead made her realize how close to dying she was. Hunting monsters here wasn't like how it was with her father's guards and adventurers there to protect her. After E had killed the remaining monsters, they had headed back to the junction to meet with the primary force. E had carried her in a princess carry because her legs were shaking so much from the fright. She had tried to walk on her own, but when her legs gave out, E had quickly grabbed her before she hit the ground. Without a word, he lifted her up into his arms and carried her the entire time. When they returned to the junction, their teacher asked them what they were doing back so soon. E had explained that they encountered thousands of monsters deep in the tunnel, and how the creatures were stronger than what they were led to believe. This was especially true considering how magic thrown by her students seemed to not affect them. Ha-Yun had then ordered them to head back to where they camped earlier. Upon returning, they were told to rest while their teacher tried to figure out what they should do. She invited E and some of the upper nobility to discuss what they were going to do. Selestra could understand why the teacher looked so distressed about these events. Monsters in these woods were not supposed to be above E rank. This meant that all of them should have been easily able to kill these monsters. The fact that such high-level monsters were located here meant that something was wrong. With such a large number of monsters inside a nest, said that they were breeding faster and developing their strength. This usually only happened right before an overflow, which still had several years to occur. As a kid, Selestra had witnessed what happens during an overflow. The city that her house ruled had reinforced all entrances and brought in all the farmers that were living outside the city walls. Each place that had a large population was always prepared for siege or overflow, so there was sufficient amount of provisions. When all preparations were finished, the sky had looked as if it was drenched in blood. During this time, there were waves of monsters that roamed beyond the city walls. If you looked outside of the walls, it appeared as if the city existed in an ocean. Guards had to fight off monsters day and night, never knowing when it would all end. Each overflow was never the same as the past event, so such an event could last days or months. Eventually, they were able to fend off the creatures and make it to the end of the overflow. In the historical texts, there was an overflow that lasted for an entire year. When the people of the world thought that they would be swallowed up by the monsters. The gods had stepped in and smote them. The armies of the gods were endless, and each of the gods seemed to possess mighty powers. The armor glimmered like the sun, and the weapons shot out destructive force. This event then created the current faith that the populace worshipped. Since then, there has never been an overflow that lasted as long as it had in the ancient texts. But the problem was that if an overflow were happening soon, it would be far too early, especially after the Empire had invaded them and attacked Leaf Village. The kingdom was likely hesitant to retaliate against the Empire for this exact reason. An effort needs to be put in to resist the waves of monsters and the red sky. Selestra clenched her fist in frustration. Her magic ability, which she was so proud of, was powerless. What was she going to tell her father? Thoughts of doing training and getting stronger ran through her mind. Earlier, she thought about how going to school was a waste of time, and how the pace she was going was enough. There was no need for her to take on quests like an adventurer because her background was sufficient to justify her path. Glancing over, Selestra was torn from her thoughts as she saw E walking past her. Jumping to the ground, she ran over to E. "E, how was the meeting with the teacher?" she asked, not really caring about the meeting. He looked back at her, smiling, and said, "Hayun stated that we will be heading back to the city. Considering how powerful the monsters are, we are not prepared to fight them." "But with how powerful you are, surely we could fight those creatures," she stammered. E placed his hand on her cheek, looking deep into her eyes, and replied, "I was able to bring out such strength because I could not bear losing you. Protecting you helped bring out such powers." Selestra could feel her face getting hotter and begin to move towards him. His words seemed to cloud her thoughts and only reminded her about the feel of his chest and arms around her. When her body was nearly against his, a voice said, "Master, we will need to head back to the city soon." Startled, she looked back at the source of the sound and noticed his servant looking at her. The way she looked, her mature-looking body and beautiful face, caused Selestra to feel a tightening in her chest and anger deep within her. Instead of moving away from E, she stared back at his servant. "I am sorry, Selestra, but I'll need to get ready to leave. The class looks like it's almost finished preparing and ready to depart." "I am happy to see that you are feeling better," E casually said, walking away with his servant in tow. Realizing that she didn't thank him or suggest that they travel together, she cursed at the missed opportunity. Thinking about that hussy of a servant, getting in between her master and Celestra's conversation, she gripped her fist tightly. Thinking of him hanging around such a beautiful woman wasn't acceptable in her book. A part of her understood that she was acting ridiculous, but she couldn't help but feel drawn to him. The way he easily defeated the monsters, while she was held in his powerful arms. Selestra shook her head, banishing any more thoughts from her head. There were still things she needed to do to get ready to head back to the city. She wanted to talk with Hayun and learn if there were methods of increasing the power of her magic. Seeing the teacher's tent where E and the others spoke, Selestra walked towards it. Before she entered the tent, she heard a voice yelling in anger. "You darn girl! How dare you have us retreat? I will not run away from such an opportunity to demonstrate my great powers." Inside the tent, Selestra could hear her teacher's voice whimpering. "But master, there are too many inside the nest. I am only doing this out of concern for you. Please forgive me." A smack could be heard coming from the tent. "Do not talk back to me. I see that more training is necessary, considering how you are so willing to disobey me." The voice sounded cruel, as if they enjoyed the thought of what was yet to come. "Master, I can do better. There is no need for such training," Hayun's voice shrieked. The voice began laughing loudly. Your body seems to be saying otherwise. I bet you look forward to these sessions. I made sure to bring in new supply, which I know you enjoy greatly. When we return back to the city, you will get to experience how displeased I am with you. I do not care what father says. You are mine, and I will do what I wish with you." Footsteps were heard heading towards the entrance of the tent. Hearing the voice walking towards her, she quickly ran to the back of the tent and hoped that this voice wasn't aware of her. Though she didn't think there was any reason to be cautious, considering her father's power, the experience inside the nest had given her a sense of understanding that overconfidence could lead to one's downfall.